Echoes of the past, the community center's windows rattled as another bus rumbled past. Nora Jensen tucked a strand of copper hair behind her ear and surveyed her classroom. Easels stood in a circle, each waiting for tomorrow's art therapy session. 5 years of building this program from nothing, and sometimes she still couldn't believe it was hers. Her phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Downtown Gallery fundraiser, Thursday. Nora groaned. Networking events weren't her strength, but the center needed donors. And as director of the Art Heals program, showing up was non-negotiable. She gathered her materials, trying not to think about the last gallery opening she'd attended. The one where she'd first met Fareed. Fareed Nassar had been nothing then, just a brilliant software developer with ambitious eyes and a laugh that made her stomach flutter. They'd met by the most forgettable painting in the room, both pretending to find meaning in its chaotic splashes. "It's clearly about capitalism's inherent contradictions," he'd said with mock seriousness, then winked when she snorted into her cheap champagne. For 8 months, they'd been inseparable. Fareed coded late into the night while she sketched beside him. She taught him watercolors. He showed her how to build a simple website for her portfolio. They dreamed together, her community art center, his revolutionary app. The future seemed painted in possibilities, until Fareed's algorithm caught the attention of venture capitalists. Suddenly, their cozy dinners became networking events with potential investors. Their weekend hikes were replaced by his business trips. Nora tried to be supportive, but it felt like watching him dissolve into someone she didn't recognize. The final blow came when his company secured its first $1 million in funding. That night, instead of celebrating with her as promised, he called to cancel. The next morning, she saw photos online, Fareed laughing with investors and a stunning venture capitalist named Danica who had her hand on his arm. When he finally came to her apartment 3 days later, his eyes were different, calculating, distant. "This is moving too fast," he'd said. "My company needs all my focus right now. I can't divide my attention." "You mean I'm a distraction?" Nora had whispered, arms wrapped around herself. "That's not what I said." His voice had been measured, reasonable. That was somehow worse than anger. "But yes, perhaps relationships are luxury items in startup culture. Luxury items, as if love were an expensive watch you set aside when inconvenient." She'd thrown his apartment key at him, watching it bounce off his expensive new suit. "Then go build your empire, Fareed. Don't worry about the distractions." 5 years had passed. 5 years of building her program, of helping children and veterans process trauma through art. 5 years of dating men who were nothing like Fareed, kind, steady men who nevertheless left her feeling something was missing. Fareed's company, Neuracom, had grown into a billion-dollar enterprise. She occasionally saw his face on technology magazines at the grocery store checkout. Each time, she would quickly look away, ignoring the hollow feeling in her chest. Tomorrow's gallery fundraiser was being hosted by the Brennan Foundation, known for supporting arts education. Nora needed to make connections to ensure her program's survival for another year. She wouldn't let old ghosts distract her. As she locked up the community center, thunder rumbled in the distance. Rain was coming. She pulled her jacket tighter, unaware that miles away, in a penthouse office, Fareed Nassar was staring at the same darkening sky, holding an invitation to the very same event.
The Gallery of Regrets, the Brennan Gallery, sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the quiet murmur of wealth. Nora adjusted her emerald dress, a splurge from a consignment shop that her friend Prisha had insisted made her look like someone who should be taken seriously. She clutched her small purse, containing precisely 15 business cards, for her Art Heals program, determined to distribute each one strategically. "Miss Jensen." A server appeared with a tray of champagne flutes. "The event coordinator asked me to ensure you have everything you need. Your program is being featured in the East Wing." Nora blinked in surprise. "Featured? There must be some mistake." "I'm just here as a guest," the server smiled. "No mistake. Please, this way." She followed him through the crowded gallery until they reached a separate exhibition space where her breath caught. The walls displayed enlarged photographs of her art therapy sessions, Children painting with abandoned joy. Veterans finding peace at pottery wheels. Elderly dementia patients reconnecting through collage work. Beside each photo hung statements from participants about how art heals had transformed their lives. "What is this?" Nora whispered, touching the elegant placard that described her program's mission. Foundation's anonymous benefactor requested this special exhibition, explained a woman in a tailored suit who approached with a warm smile. "I'm Josephine Brennan. Your program exemplifies exactly what our foundation supports: art as a pathway to healing. The benefactor has been following your work for years." Nora's mind raced. Anonymous benefactor? Following her work for years. That's ... incredible, she managed. "May I ask who anonymity was a condition of the donation?" Josephine said apologetically. "But they've pledged $500,000 to expand your program over the next 3 years. The room seemed to tilt. $500,000 would transform everything: new facilities, more staff, scholarships for participants who couldn't afford even their modest fees. As Josephine excused herself to greet other guests, Nora wandered through her exhibition in a daze. Pausing before a photo of herself guiding an elderly man's hand as they painted together, she remembered that day Mr. Abernathy had spoken. His first words since his stroke while creating that sunset. Technique improved considerably after that. "Session," said a voice behind her that stopped her heart. Mid-dash beat, she didn't need to turn around. 5 years had passed, but she would recognize that voice anywhere slightly deeper now. Perhaps, but with the same hint of an accent that emerged when he was nervous. Slowly she faced him. Farid Nassar stood before her, more handsome than she remembered, but with new lines around his eyes. His custom suit couldn't disguise the tension in his shoulders. "Hello, Nora." Outside, rain began to patter against the gallery's glass ceiling. The sound transported her instantly to their first kiss, sheltered beneath a bus stop during an unexpected downpour. "What are you doing here?" she asked, proud of how steady her voice remained. "I was invited." His eyes never left her face, studying her as if memorizing new details. "Your work is extraordinary." "Thank you," she said formally. "Nuracom seems to be thriving as well. Congratulations." An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words. "The anonymous benefactor," she said suddenly, realization dawning. "It's you, isn't it?" Farid's expression gave him away before he could form a denial. "How did you know?" "Because you're standing in front of a photo where I'm clearly explaining color theory, and you recognized Mr. Abernathy from 3 sessions later." She crossed her arms. "You've been watching my program?" "Funding it." "Why?" The rain intensified, drumming against the glass ceiling. Lightning briefly illuminated his face, revealing a vulnerability she'd never seen during their relationship. "Would you believe me if I said I was trying to make amends?" he asked quietly. "For what? Breaking my heart? Or for treating love like a luxury item?" The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Farid flinched. "I deserve that. But there's more to the story than you know. Could we talk somewhere private?" Before she could answer, Josephine returned with potential donors eager to meet the woman behind the celebrated program. Nora was swept into conversations about grants and expansion opportunities. Everything she'd come here hoping for. When she finally extricated herself an hour later, Farid was nowhere to be seen. Only a business card remained on the pedestal beside her favorite photograph. With a handwritten note on the back, the roof garden. "When you're ready, I'll wait all night if necessary." Outside, the storm intensified. Nora stared at the card, torn between walking away and finally getting answers to questions that had haunted her for 5 years.
Portraits of Truth, the roof garden was transformed by rain. Water streamed from sculptural installations and pooled on the wooden deck. Protected by a glass pergola, Farid stood with his back to her, watching lightning split the sky over the city. His jacket was draped over a chair, his shirt sleeves rolled up, a glimpse of the less formal man she'd once known. "I didn't think you'd come," he said without turning, somehow sensing her presence. "I almost didn't." Nora remained by the door, maintaining distance. $500,000 is quite the elaborate apology. He turned then, and she was struck by the sadness in his eyes. It wasn't meant as an apology. It was recognition of important work. Your work. That doesn't explain why you've been following my program for years without reaching out. Farid gestured to a dry seating area. When they were settled, thunder rumbling overhead, he began. 3 years ago, my younger sister Samira was diagnosed with PTSD after serving as a combat medic. She wouldn't talk to anyone. Not me, not our parents, not the VA therapists. She was disappearing into herself. His voice cracked slightly. Then her counselor suggested your program. Nora's breath caught. Samira Nassar? With the intricate mandala designs? He nodded, a small smile touching his lips. She never mentioned our connection? She registered under her married name, Rodriguez. Nora remembered the quiet woman whose hands had shaken so badly she could barely hold a brush at first. Over months, Samira had gradually opened up through her art, eventually becoming one of their volunteer mentors. She's one of our success stories. You saved her, Farid said simply. And that made me question everything I thought I knew about success and value. Rain drummed harder. Nora pulled her wrap tighter around her shoulders. I built Neurocom believing technology could solve humanity's problems, he continued. I sacrificed everything for that vision, including us. But watching Samira heal through something as ancient and simple as making art. He shook his head. It humbled me. So you became my secret benefactor? I started by making small anonymous donations. Then I set up a foundation to support similar programs nationwide. The more I learned about your approach, the more I realized how wrong I'd been about what matters. Nora studied him, looking for the calculating businessman who had dismissed their relationship as a distraction. Instead, she saw someone different, older, certainly, but also more grounded. The night you saw me with Danica, he said, addressing the wound directly, she wasn't just an investor. Her firm was threatening a hostile takeover that would have stripped our algorithm and fired my entire team. I was negotiating to protect 20 people's jobs. You could have told me that, Nora said quietly. I should have. But I was terrified of failing them and... He hesitated. Terrified of failing you. You believed in me so completely. The pressure of that faith, while beautiful, was overwhelming when everything was falling apart. So you pushed me away instead. I convinced myself it was better for you, that you deserved someone who could give you more than cancellations and stress. He looked out at the storm. The irony is that after securing that funding, after becoming everything I thought I wanted to be, I realized success feels hollow without someone to share it with. Someone who knew you when you were nothing. Nora's throat tightened. How many times had she imagined this conversation? Yet now, faced with his vulnerability, she found her rehearsed indignation wavering. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, she said carefully. Neither am I. Farid's gaze returned to her. But I've missed your friend every day. The person who challenged my thinking and made me see beauty in unexpected places. Something shifted in Nora's chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Before she could respond, her phone chimed with a weather alert. The storm was intensifying. Flash floods were expected. I should go, she said, rising. I have an early workshop tomorrow at Pinecrest Retreat. Farid stood as well, careful not to crowd her. Pinecrest? Up in the mountains? She nodded, already calculating whether she should cancel given the weather forecast. Be careful driving in this storm, he said, concern evident in his voice. And Nora? Thank you for listening. Even if this is all you're willing to give, it's more than I deserve. As she turned to leave, lightning illuminated his face once more, revealing not the confident billionaire from magazine covers, but simply a man who had made mistakes and was trying to find his way back from them. Canvas of Reconciliation Pinecrest Retreat Center perched on a mountainside, usually offering spectacular valley views. Today, however, dense fog wrapped around the rustic buildings like cotton batting, and rain pounded the metal roof of the art studio where Nora had set up for her weekend workshop. Ms. Jensen? The retreat coordinator, Bernard, poked his head in. We've got a problem. The access road is flooded at the lower switchback. Nobody's coming up or going down until tomorrow at earliest. Nora sighed. How many participants made it? Just 3. They arrived yesterday. And, one gentleman who came up early this morning before the road closed. Said he had business with the retreat. Mr. Nassar. Nora nearly dropped the pottery clay she was preparing. Farid is here? Bernard nodded. He asked about joining your workshop. I told him I'd check with you. Her mind raced. After their conversation last night, she'd barely slept, alternating between anger at old wounds and confusion about her lingering feelings. The last thing she needed was Farid watching her teach for 2 days while they were essentially trapped together. It's fine, she found herself saying. The more the merrier. When Farid appeared in the doorway 30 minutes later, he'd transformed from the polished executive of last night into someone more reminiscent of the man she'd once known. Faded jeans, a simple sweater, rain-dampened hair curling slightly at his temples. Bernard said you approved, he said, uncertainty in his voice. But I can keep to myself if you'd prefer. Nora gestured to an empty stool. You drove all the way up a mountain in a storm to talk. We might as well talk. Her 3 other participants, an elderly man recovering from stroke and 2 teenagers from a youth intervention program, arrived as she was setting up the clay exercise. She guided them through centering techniques, demonstrating how to ground themselves while working with the resistant medium. Clay teaches us patience, she explained. It remembers every touch, every moment of frustration. It asks us to breathe through difficulty rather than forcing outcomes. She glanced up to find Farid watching her intently, his hands covered in clay but motionless on the wheel. Throughout the morning, Nora maintained professional distance, but she couldn't help noticing how Farid interacted with the others, kneeling patiently beside Mr. Washington as the elderly man struggled with arthritic hands, sharing quiet jokes with Damon and Letitia that coaxed rare smiles from the troubled teens. By afternoon, the storm had intensified. The electricity flickered, then failed completely. Bernard brought lanterns, creating an unexpectedly intimate atmosphere as rain drummed against the windows and shadows danced across their workspace. Perhaps we should adapt the exercise, Nora suggested. Sometimes art emerges from limitations. She guided them through creating relief sculptures by touch rather than sight, feeling their way through the process. When the others left for dinner, Farid remained, washing clay from his hands in the studio sink. You're remarkable with them, he said quietly. You always had that gift, seeing people's potential beneath their struggles. Except with you, she countered. I didn't see how much you were struggling back then. His hands stilled under the water. I never let you see. That was my failure, not yours. The lantern light cast his face in golden shadow as he turned toward her. After you threw that key at me, I buried myself in work for 2 years. Built Nuracom into everything investors wanted, but I was miserable. He dried his hands slowly. Then one day I was giving a keynote about how our technology would transform human connection, and I realized I hadn't had a real human connection myself in years. Outside, lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating the studio in harsh white light before returning them to the lantern's warm glow. That's when I started the foundation, he continued. I thought philanthropy might fill the emptiness. And it helped, especially seeing programs like yours change lives. But it wasn't enough. What would be enough? Nora asked, surprising herself with the question. Farid moved closer, not touching her but near enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. Forgiveness would be a start. Not to resume what we had. We're different people. Now. But to see if these new versions of ourselves might still recognize something worth exploring in each other. Thunder shook the building as if punctuating his words. In the trembling lantern light, with clay still under her fingernails and rain isolating them from the world, the carefully constructed walls Nora had built around her heart began to crack. I was so angry for so long, she whispered. But anger is heavy. And seeing you with those kids today, she hesitated. Maybe these new versions do have something to learn from each other. Farid's smile began slowly, then transformed his entire face. It wasn't the confident smile from magazine covers, but something more genuine. The smile of a man unexpectedly offered something precious, he thought lost forever. As the storm raged outside, They sat cross-legged on the studio floor, surrounded by half-formed clay sculptures. They talked for hours about her program's challenges, his company's ethical dilemmas, her father's passing, his sister's recovery. With each story exchanged, the 5-year chasm between them narrowed. Not erased, but bridged with newfound understanding. When Bernard knocked to announce that generators had restored power to the dining hall for late-night soup, they realized they'd lost track of time completely. The first symptom of a connection rekindling between two people who had never quite forgotten the shape of each other's hearts. Masterpiece of second chances, spring sunshine filtered through the community center windows, casting rainbow prisms across the new pottery wheels and drawing tables. 6 months had passed since the storm at Pinecrest. Nora pinned up the final schedule for the expanded Art Heals program, now serving 3 times as many participants with a full-time staff of 5 therapists. Her phone buzzed with a message from Fareed. Board meeting running late. Still on for dinner? Have news about the Philadelphia expansion. She smiled, typing back. Dinner at 7. Don't forget your sketchbook this time. Their relationship had evolved cautiously after Pinecrest. Weekly coffee meetings became regular dinners, which gradually transformed into something deeper but fundamentally different from their first attempt at love. This time there was no rush, no desperate merging of identities. They maintained separate apartments, separate careers, separate lives that chose to intertwine rather than collapse into one another. Prisha appeared in the doorway with a stack of new participant applications. Your billionaire boyfriend texted me about the gala next month. He wants to know if we need more auction items. Nora rolled her eyes at the teasing. He's not my boyfriend. We're partners. The word felt right, acknowledging both their personal and professional collaboration. Whatever you call it, Prisha said. It works. I've never seen 2 people rebuild something broken into something stronger. After Prisha left, Nora found herself staring at the framed photograph on her desk. Not a romantic portrait, but an image from their first official collaboration 3 months ago. Fareed stood surrounded by Neurocom engineers who had volunteered to help renovate the community center. His tech team had created adaptive tools for participants with physical limitations, while her therapists had introduced the engineers to mindfulness practices to manage workplace stress. 2 worlds, once seen as incompatible, now enriching each other. That evening, Nora arrived at their favorite restaurant to find Fareed already waiting, sketchbook open beside his water glass. Since reconnecting, they'd established a ritual of sketching ideas together, a tangible reminder of communication's importance. The Philadelphia Center's funding came through, he announced as she sat down. And there's something else. He slid a folder across the table. The board approved our proposal for Neurocom's new Department of Therapeutic Technologies. Nora opened the folder to find detailed plans for developing accessible digital art tools for people with disabilities, the project they'd conceptualized together during late-night conversations. You're listed as co-director, he pointed out, if you want it. She studied the proposal, emotions conflicting. This would mean stepping back from daily therapy sessions. It would mean reaching thousands more people who need what you offer, he countered gently. But only if it feels right. The old Fareed might have pressed harder, emphasized the logical advantages. This Fareed simply waited, respecting her process. The old Nora might have rejected anything that took her away from direct service. This Nora considered broader impact alongside personal fulfillment. I'll think about it, she promised, reaching for her menu. Later, walking along the riverfront with coffee cups warming their hands against the spring evening's chill, Nora stopped at a bench overlooking the water. I've been thinking about what you said at Pinecrest, she said. About success feeling hollow without someone to share it with? Fareed nodded, waiting. I've realized it's not just about sharing success, she continued. It's about having someone who understands your failures, too. Someone who sees your complete self, not just your achievements or your potential, but your struggles and fears as well. She turned to face him fully. 5 years ago, we were hiding parts of ourselves. You hid your insecurities. I hid my doubts. We were trying to be perfect versions of ourselves for each other. And now? He asked softly. Now we've seen each other broken. We've watched each other rebuild. There's no hiding anymore. She took his hand, threading her fingers through his. That's what makes this different. That's what makes this real. Rain began to fall, a gentle spring shower nothing like the storm that had reunited them. Farid reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carved wooden key. I had this made, he explained, not to rush anything but as a symbol. 5 years ago, you threw a key at me, ending what we had. This one isn't to any physical door. It's just a reminder that whatever we build now, we're both choosing to unlock it together. Nora accepted the wooden key, running her finger along its intricate grain. No empires this time, she said. Just a life where we both matter equally. Under the soft rain, she leaned forward and kissed him, not with the desperate passion of their youth, but with the deliberate tenderness of two people who understood love's true value only after having lost it once before. They walked home hand in hand through the gentle shower, talking about Philadelphia plans and adaptive technology designs, about art therapy techniques and neural network applications, two experts in different fields finding unexpected harmony in their contrasts. Their conversation flowed easily between personal and professional, between dreams and practicalities, between past wounds and future possibilities. Neither noticed when the rain stopped, too absorbed in the masterpiece they were creating together. A relationship painted not in broad, romantic gestures, but in the careful, intentional brushstrokes of mutual respect, shared purpose, and love that had matured like fine wine through the years of separation. Above them, a rainbow arched across the clearing sky, nature's own symbol of beauty that emerges only after the storm has passed.